The building starts with the foundation, which is the concrete we poured in the last episode of the shop build, and now some pressure-treated lumber on top of a foam sill plate gasket. The foam, as the name would imply, provides a gasket that helps reduce air and moisture infiltration between the foundation and the sill, which is the piece of lumber that is laid and fastened to the concrete and will provide a surface to attach the vertical members. Once the sill plate is securely fastened, it's time to put up the walls. I ended up paying a local company to build the structure prefab, which basically means they build the majority of the framing in their warehouse and bring it to the site on a trailer. This can really streamline the process and save quite a bit of time, but it's not without its drawbacks, and we'll get to those in a minute. As you can see, these walls being pre-built go up rather quickly. It simplifies the process into putting pieces in the correct spot and fastening it down. But there are other things to consider, such as keeping the walls square and keeping everything plumb, which basically means double checking your measurements here and there so nothing goes out of whack and you're not stuck trying to fix it after everything's been put up. Admittedly, I wasn't around for some portions of this build, and this happened to be one of them. Let's pause. Now you may have spotted a problem here. The rafters are not coming out past the edge of the wall. So unlike most buildings you'd see, this one would end up with some sort of flat side, which would make it impossible to have an eave or an overhang. Basically, we'd be looking at something like this, when what we need is something like this. So I had to come up with a solution after the fact. Basically, the solution was creating a separate overhang and bolting it onto the side in front of the building to create my eave. Now you can see I've got my eaves on the building, and while the guys were out to lunch, I cut larger openings and installed larger windows. I didn't drop a ceiling in the initial plans for this building, but I decided that a loft space may be useful for storage, so I went out and got some larger lumber for ceiling joists. This also gives me an opportunity to add a lot of structure to the building, as well as attempting to pull in a wall that was a little bit out of square. After the siding is done on the front, it's time to install the man door, the transom windows, and finish the siding on the sides and the back of the building. And I think a few mistakes were made here. The door was installed in a way that does not close flush, which was something I didn't realize until the job had been completed. They also cut the seal from under the door and did not create another one, so any moisture in the front of the door would migrate underneath into the shop, which sounds like a fairly easy thing to fix, but once you've got walls up and drywall and you notice a puddle in the middle of your building, coming up with a solution for that kind of issue becomes a little tricky. You'll also see me intermittently popping out of frame as I decided to go ahead and do all the sheathing for the loft space on my own as these guys are working. Now I've got to install the soffit and fascia on the eaves. And since this was not originally discussed in the plans for the building, I just figured I'd do it myself. I start with installing the J-channel on the inside corner of the eave. This will hold the pieces of soffit and cover the inside rough edge. I'm stack cutting the soffit pieces with a circular saw and just a regular carbide construction blade. I then take those pieces and lay them inside the J-channel and use a pneumatic stapler to interlock them in place. Once I put up all the soffit, it's time to do the fascia. Both the soffit and fascia were leftover pieces from the house on the property where the shop was built, so I have to be strategic about how I cut and lay out the pieces. They also aren't all the same size, so I do have to trim some of them to fit the 2x4 subfascia. On the outside edge of the shingles is a metal drip edge. This keeps water from getting underneath the shingles and into the eaves on the building. But they put the drip edge on so tight that it's difficult to tuck the fascia up underneath the way that it's supposed to go. So you may catch me struggling in this video here and there while putting it up. I use electric metal shears to trim all the fascia to size. I slide the fascia under the drip edge and use matching white nails and a hammer to secure the fascia in place. Being careful to keep the hammer flush to the bottom of the fascia because it's pretty easy to dent. Ask me how I know. And that's pretty much the entire outside of the building complete. So I've never done any of this stuff before, and I was a little hesitant, to be honest, which aside from the time issue is why I hired some people to help me do it, which kind of turned out to be a little bit of a mistake. I mean, in hindsight, I could have done most of this myself, and I wouldn't have to worry about coming back and fixing mistakes and monitoring people in the process. The guys I hired are used to building small sheds, and this was a little bit out of their wheelhouse. So I can't blame them too much for the mistakes that happened. And to be honest, I probably should have been here more. I probably should have been working on the building and participating more and monitoring more, being more active, simply knowing that I paid cheap guys to do cheap work. But live and learn. Everything's come together well enough, even though I had to go back and fix a few mistakes. Overall, I think it looks pretty good. So I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Shop Build series, which I think is going to be me custom making this barn light mount, which I think got to be pretty cool. So don't forget to like and subscribe, hit notifications if you're interested in following this series. I hope you found this interesting and entertaining. Maybe it gives you a few ideas for your next build. But until the next video, you guys have a good one. Weird. Okay. Weird. That sound echoes. I don't know if it sounds right in camera or not, but it sounds really weird here. It's like giving feedback in the microphone. Don't know. Barn light with a custom mount. I think that's probably what it's going to be. It's not going to focus. I forgot my focus is dead on this lens, so as much as I need the wide angle, I got no focus. So hopefully I'm in focus through this whole thing. I don't know. I'm hoping. It looks like it's in focus, but it's a tiny screen. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this episode. Next episode of the episode of the. That's what I should have named it. That's what I should have named the series, was episode of the. Maybe I'll spell the next episode. The title of the next episode will be episode of the. My hat crooked.